Ivy Miller knew she was going to die on the 14th of October, 1993, at midnight, just as she turned 30. What she did not know was that she would be gazing with unbound curiosity at the thing that would kill her that very same morning. This was her routine, but with one significant difference that would steer the course of her day until its end, and, inevitably, hers. Chain-smoking with a black coffee in hand, she stared out of the window as she sat precariously on her window seat in her cupboard-made home London flat. The smoke from the cigarette swirled, chain-linked around her fingers, creeping upwards towards her furrowed brow as she took a calming drag from her cigarette and a sobering sip of the bitter coffee as she observed the view below her. The bustle of London traffic was almost absurd in its stereotypes. Vendors setting up stalls, businessmen almost bumping into the walk of shamers due to eye contact being a sacrificial offense down south, all of which were completely unfazed by the hulking mass that stood next to the lamppost outside her window. The thing she had named over the years of dreading familiarity as the presence. She could not pinpoint when she had started to see the presence. She only knew that the sense of foreboding and dread had never seemed to have left since childhood. She often viewed this feeling as some sort of emotional tumor, intangible and yet inbuilt to her very being, like a physical ailment she just had to cope with while being increasingly aware of its malingency. She supposed her earliest memory was playing at the park with friends when she had seen what she had thought was a man watching her over the hill. Even now, she scoffed at how narcissistic it would sound to others that she, and she alone, was who the man was staring at, but somehow, even then, she knew the presence was there for her, and it terrified her. Running to her mother, sobbing and burying her face in her comforting smell, she cried out her protest. Her mother could not see who or what had caused such distress in her daughter, and no one else would ever see the presence either. She closed her eyes now, and even with the intrusive smell of coffee and smoke, she could sift through these sensory sensations and detect a floral and clean fragrance that cut through her present day into memories of her mother. She longed for that smell to be here, now, beside her. But she knew that those days of safety and solace were long over for her. She had not seen her mother in years, not since she had stayed with her. Not since the illness, and not since the necessary detachment Ivy had imposed to keep her mother safe. The presence followed, she knew, and it grew closer. Any laws of nature and survival seemed to decay under the influence of the presence. Seeing the presence over the years at a distance had evolved to increasing closeness, suffocating her and those around her. As she grew older, anything alive around her seemed to dissipate with her existence. Nature quieted as she walked the London streets. Birds stopped their endless communication with each other as though their previous songs sang of her, and they did not wish her to know out of fear of retribution. She had to bury many a pet in her lifetime, their deaths an unexplained mystery, her ownership deemed an unlucky streak with the obligatory sympathies. Sometimes, when she would walk alone through green spaces, she felt as though the wind would stop around her, making her surroundings airless and claustrophobic. Then, her mother got sick. Her beautiful, energetic, larger-than-life mother was cut down in her prime by a stroke after staying with her for a month. Many hospital appointments later, and a phone call from family in Scotland to arrange a well-earned rest proved to work wonders for her mother. The real cure, she knew, was the lack of proximity to herself, which she had enforced over these last 5 years. Now, on the eve of her 30th birthday, she stared impassively at the thing that had isolated, controlled, and dominated her existence. 2 things happened at that moment. The cigarette she had been neglecting had reached its apex and thanked her in kind by burning her fingers. And as she moved away for a split second to acknowledge the slight, the presence moved. She froze. It couldn't be. Her mind immediately rejected what her eyes had acknowledged. She had never seen the presence move. It was an impossibility. She knew the presence grew closer, of course. The day the presence had migrated from a distant shadow to closer and taking a more solid stature was the day she had her first kiss and her first cigarette all in the same night. And she had pulled away from both only to see a form under the flickering lamppost light down her road. So close to home. So close to her. But never with her seeing a single movement. She brushed it off and headed to her bathroom sink to plunge her burn under the icy tap as a salve. When she turned to the window, the presence was gone. She pressed her hand to the window where the presence had last been, leaving a condensation-surrounded handprint on the window as she sprinted to lock the door, sink to the floor, and sob. Time passed in that little London flat. Time that had seemed so endless and now so precious. Time that Ivy felt she had not earned or utilized. Time that was now torturing her with its slow and progressive march. It was 1 minute to midnight when Ivy sat on the bed in her towel after showering. A weird sense of calm had taken over her. Not quite the sense of calm that acceptance brings. Rather, the calm before the storm. A malevolent silence before the true chaos begins. She stared at the door. Her hand draped over the side of the bed as a lone water droplet traced her wrist and went down her fingertip. "Are you there, Presence?" she whispered. The water droplet made its break for freedom, but did not hit the floor. Instead, it hit another set of fingers as a hand reached up from under the bed and grabbed Ivy's. The police would say that it was a mystery. A phone call from a notorious nosy neighbor would inform the attending officers that that girl from upstairs was making unsociable noises in the middle of the night. When pressed, the neighbor would state that she thought she had snuck in an aggressive dog, despite there being laws that prevented pets within the building. When asked if she had seen an aggressive dog, the neighbor merely stated she heard a lot of ripping and tearing, and that it had got its jaws around her for sure. Entering the property had been worryingly easy. Though locked, the door had been persuaded to let the officers gain entry with no more than 2 shoulder shoves. The flat was empty. Not surprising, but also not reassuring. The air seemed stale in the flat, as though it had not been lived in for some time. Suspecting more a nuisance call than foul play, the flat was searched and found no more sign of life than an unwashed coffee mug and an overflowing ashtray. "You reckon you can see anything through the window? Have a gander, would ya?" "Not much in terms of visuals. Do you think it's worth asking that couple if they saw anything?" Moving towards the window, the officer peered over his colleague's shoulder. "What couple?" he said. The officer turned back to look. The street was empty.
Fondest Memorials. You know those things you sort of just notice in life sometimes? Things that seem out of place even though you know they shouldn't be that way. I'll give you an example just so we're on the same page. The kind of thing I'm talking about is when there's an accident and everyone but one person in a crowd is gawking right at it, like they're not interested. That's how out of place this building, or rather the inside of it, was. Fondest Memorials was the name above the shop door. It was a store that sold headstones for graves. See, the strange thing about this place was, it was always open and yet no one ever went in. My friend Jesse and I have to walk past that shop every time we walk home from school. It's directly on our route. The store always has a little open sign hanging up, but no one is inside. Not even a salesman. Which was something that made it all the more creepier. The addition of a desk lamp that was always on didn't help the unsettling prickling you got on the back of your neck from knowing something was wrong with this place. It wasn't just a place to do with the afterlife. It was like looking into a cold and lonely world with all the blank headstones waiting to be decorated with fancy, squiggly writing styles. And that one desk light that was always on, lighting up the brown desk where no one was sat. So why is it that something so glaringly obvious went so unnoticed? Why is it that there were never any customers or anyone sat at the desk with one desk light? People never even seemed to glance in the shop window when they walked by. Jesse and I know because we watched one time. They just went by and ignored all the blank headstones and the lonely shop that looked so out of place. Jesse and I, being the younger things, we decided to investigate this for ourselves. I can tell you now that we did find out why no one ever did go into this lonely shop with the one desk light illuminating the brown wooden desk where no one ever sat. After school one day, we actually went into the shop, deciding to take the direct approach rather than skirt around the issue. We were one of the crowds, like I mentioned before. The door opened and a little bell tinkled. We had entered Fondest Memorials. To both our surprises, we were greeted by a gaunt-looking man who came out of a back room. We expected the place to be empty.
Yes, my young friends. And what might I be able to help you with today? A double engraving, perhaps? Best friends, were you?
We were utterly confused about what the gaunt man was talking about. Even as he sat down at the desk and made the shop look less bare all in one instant. Now it was another business like any other. Perhaps we'd made a mistake.
I know. It's always a big shock, especially to one so young. But don't worry, you're going to be completely fine. All's well that ends well, after all.
The gaunt man smiled at us and Jesse and I turned around to leave. So our even greater surprise and seeing the strange gaunt man now occupying the not-so-lonely desk, our customer entered. Something we had never seen happen before. It was a tall, good-looking woman who looked as though she hadn't slept in a few days.
Ah yes, if you'll excuse me, my young friends. I just have to attend to Mrs. Birch. I'm sure she's eager to go and meet her husband. I'll be right with you.
The tall, good-looking woman addressed him. Yes, I decided that I'd like it to read simply, in loving memory, daughter, wife, and mother.
The simple memorials are often the best, Mrs. Birch. I get so tired of engraving people's life stories all over one small piece of stone. If you'll just follow me.
The gaunt man got up from a desk and escorted the tall, good-looking woman to the back room. Jesse and I decided it was really time for us to leave now. We went for the door where the word closed hung opposite to the open on the other side. I grabbed the door handle. My hand slipped through. I tried again, with the same result. Jesse tried to open the door, but the same thing happened. Our hands just couldn't grasp the door handle. The gaunt man came out of the back room with Mrs. Birch.
I'm afraid the world of the living is closed off to you now, my young friends. Now, what would you like to be put on your headstones?
He sat back down at his desk and got out a pen. The reason no one ever entered into Fondest Memorials was because they never intended to leave again. The word closed seemed all the more vivid in my mind now. We had entered the world of the afterlife and not even known it.